Hello?
Has the program started?
You're on mute, Colleen.
Are you able to hear me? This is Victor.
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Victor.
Hello, hello. I've been having a problem with my audio.
Well, it's good.
You can hear me fine, though. I don't hear
Yes.
you very well, but if you can hear me, we're good.
Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Maybe turn up.
We can hear you. And welcome to today's Town Hall 8. My name's Colleen Stovall, and I'm the Director of Programs and Events for AIA Miami. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. Please be sure to mute yourself if you're not a presenter and turn off your video camera. This is going to save us bandwidth and makes for a smoother presentation. I wanted to remind you all that this Town Hall meeting qualifies for one HSWLU credit. If you didn't provide your AR and AIA numbers when you registered, please email them to marilyn@aia-miami.org. We will be holding a Q&A session at the end of the town hall. Please send your questions through the Zoom chat feature at any time during the event, and we'll get to them during the end of the town hall. And tomorrow you're going to receive a brief survey about this event. Please take a moment to fill it out because it's going to help us focus topics for future events. And now I'd like to introduce the president of AIA Miami, Daphne Gurry.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. This is our 8th town hall meeting, and we're here to serve not only our members, but the community at large, providing a vehicle for the promotion of ideas and exchange of information that we all need in the architecture, engineering, and construction industries. A couple of things I'd like to highlight about AIA Miami. We remain closed. The offices will reopen on June 1st. However, anything that you need, you can continue to contact AI offices either by phone or by email. Every Monday, we are sending out to our members a newsletter on COVID-19 related issues. Every Wednesday, we send by email as well a newsletter for MCAT, our sister partner organization that is the forward-facing entity of architecture in the public realm. Every Friday, we send our Friday Facts, which is vital information related to our profession, and even has opportunities listed for free to, again, assist our members in the development of their profession. I'd like to just tell you again how excited I am to be your president this year under these unprecedented times, and to be able to share this information via Zoom through a town hall meeting. We are going to continue to have town hall meetings on every Wednesday at noon, and we will also be adding some roundtable discussions and cross-promoting other organizations, professional organizations, including the NOMA, SAME, the Society of American Military Engineers, and the Professional Landscape organization as well, all in a way to add value to our members and cross-promote and encourage networking. A couple of things for those of you who may not be in touch with some of the things that AIA has been doing for you. I just wanted to tell you what an honor, again, it's been for me to serve as your president. And I've been on the board for several years now. I had an opportunity to go to Tallahassee twice already, where I personally witnessed and walked the halls to be able to pitch ideas and important legislation to our representatives in Tallahassee. And through our efforts of walking the halls along with AI Florida, we were very instrumental in getting legislation passed to be able to protect our profession, not only to prevent any deregulation efforts that come up for our profession, as well as protecting the Competitive Consultant Negotiation Act. So with that, I think I want to turn over the presentation to Jason Hagopian, who's going to talk a little bit about Christopher Kelly program. Jason?
Hey, thanks, Daphne. Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Hagopian, and I am the principal of Sao Design Group. I'm also on the Miami Center for Architecture and Design board. And of course, I'm chairing a really exciting committee right now for co-chairing for AIA Miami called the Christopher Kelly Leadership Development Program. For those of you that may or may not know about the program, we started producing this program here in Miami in 2017. This is an emerging leadership training program. It's really exciting, and we're having an orientation next week on June 4th at 5 p.m. I want to strongly suggest you register and attend the orientation. You can go to the AIAMiami.org website and go to the calendar, and you can register, and you'll also see some information and the applications for this program. Like I said, we've graduated 2 classes already. We focus on core professional skills, such as entrepreneurship, firm management, teamwork, collaboration. It's a really, really exciting program. It spans over a 8 to 9 month period. There's a commitment once a month. And we'll give you more details at the orientation, but I just wanted to kind of give a plug for this program. It's really important. You'll be hearing from us this week and next week, and we look forward to having the orientation. It's going to be a Zoom call, so that should be exciting. Normally it's an in-person, but we're going to conduct this one over Zoom. We think it's a fun opportunity to maybe get some more people involved, and we'll have some surprises on that call too. So thank you, Daphne, for the moment.
Sure.
I appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Jason. I'd like to introduce Cheryl Jacobs, Executive Vice President of AIA Miami.
Thanks, Daphne. Hi, everybody. Glad to have you all on our Zoom meeting. We're all becoming Zoomified and Zoom experts, and I think we may not be giving this up for a while. I'm going to introduce our speakers, who all are muted, and I just want to remind you to unmute yourselves, because I don't want you to start talking as you're muted. And I also want to remind you guys that are on the call to mute your sound and your video. So let me bring to you, we picked people for this that have done a lot of education work from the architect side, to firms in our community that have for many years been involved with K-12 design, and also a client, Victor Alonso, a friend of our chapter for many, many years. Victor is the Eco-Sustainability Officer for the Miami-Dade Public Schools. And then we have Jose Murguido. Jose is the Vice President and Partner at Zyscovich Architects, and Lourdes Solera, Co-Managing Principal at MCHarry. So welcome all 3 of you. Jose, your speaker is still muted. There you go.
Thank you.
So welcome everybody. So I thought I would throw out a general question that we've been asking pretty much everybody in our programming. How are you adapting to change and to being resilient throughout this pandemic? Want to start, Lourdes?
Sure. Well, we're adapting. I think our office has, we blended much easier into virtual work from home than any of us anticipated. I'm sure it's the same for many offices. So we have most of the people working from home. We have some stragglers, myself included, that come into the office on and off to just get out of the house. And it has worked quite well because the space is big enough that the few stragglers are really so far away from each other that we are practicing social distancing. It's a little hard for me, I admit, when I'm home. So I have to force myself, get dressed, get a cup of tea so that I can feel like I'm at work versus when I'm actually in the office. But you know, the office staff tells us they enjoy being away from traffic, but they kind of miss the interaction. So we're doing the best that we can, including Zoom happy hours sometimes on Friday just to see each other's faces. It seems to be working.
Great. How about you, Jose?
Well, we had the same type of experience. It was surprisingly simple to make the transition. And, you know, the measure is that were we able to make our deliveries. And since we have Victor on the line, I want to reassure him that our productivity has not suffered at all as a result of basically having the staff working from home. We got about 120 people in our office, and maybe 10 to 15 are actually in the office. The rest are working from home. And we're experiencing the same thing in our Orlando office. And then, of course, our New York office is absolutely locked down. So New York is a whole separate situation. But the surprising thing is that clients, as well as our staff, have very seamlessly adapted to the new virtual environment. And I think a lot of this stuff is going to stay. As you just mentioned, you know, this town hall meeting is a wonderful format for people exchanging ideas. And it's welcomed, and you spend the time listening and interacting with people as opposed to commuting. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Jose. How about you, Victor?
Well, I would say that the first couple of weeks were a little bit stressful for a lot of people, just getting used to working at home, having all the technology, everything set up, getting used to the Zoom calls, the Teams meetings, and that sort of thing. But I found, and I think everyone has found, that it's become surprisingly easy and even more productive in many ways to work from home than having to come in the office. And just in the past couple of weeks, we've started bringing people into the office. I'm in the office really for the second time today. I've been working from home the whole time. I came in one day last week, and already I'm finding that it's more productive at home. I'm having audio problems with a speaker here on this computer. But so people have adapted extremely well. Obviously, we hope that soon things will change. It won't get back to normal for quite a while. It's going to have to be phased. It's going to take time. We expect that at the initial phase to have no more than 15 to 20, maybe 25% of the people in the office. People really don't want to come in. They prefer to stay home and work. They feel more comfortable. They're not scared. Frankly, right now, there's hardly anybody in our offices. So it's very organized in terms of checking in. There's someone taking our temperature. We got screened coming in. There's sanitizer everywhere. Everybody's taking every precaution possible. If you're anywhere other than your private office, everyone's wearing a face mask. But there's very few people in the office. It's going to be interesting to see where do we go from here, how long it takes to get back to normal, what we think is normal. But it will always be impacted by what we're going through right now.
Yeah, well, things will change, just like after 9/11, you know, airport travel, flight travel had changed.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw this back to you, Victor. What do you see as the immediate effect on current projects that the school board has?
Well, the immediate effect has been relatively minor in terms of our scheduling our projects. Projects that were in construction have continued under construction. Projects that are in design have continued on schedule. As Lourdes and Jose could both attest, I've really been surprised by how well the architects have been able to continue working and being productive, keeping projects on schedule. Our construction projects being unimpeded by having to work around school operations actually are progressing quite well. So we really have not been impacted very much at all by this in terms of projects moving forward. We're still taking projects to the board for awarding, commissioning, for projects that have to be advertised. We're still moving forward and we're not being delayed at all.
Well, that's great to hear. So I think the big question or the big discussion that a lot of firms are having, Jose, is what do you think will be new approaches to design in terms of schools thinking about the experiences of the pandemic and how design might change?
Well, you know, that's the $60,000 or $60 million or whatever number you want to put on it question. There is so much to be learned as we are trying to understand this virus and the impact that it's had. There's enormous amounts of research going on right now that are informing how we're going to be designing our buildings. And one of the things that we've been doing is that we've been looking a lot at healthy buildings, well building certification standards. Those folks have put together fine list of recommendations as to how buildings could be used as tools to help create safe environments. But I think the greatest impact will be for the operation of the school, because, until a vaccine is defined, the way that we're going to approach schools, the relationships that children are going to have with teachers and with themselves is going to be a significant game changer, I think. Everything from the arrival sequence to busing to cafeteria to everything else, we're going to have to be extremely careful and have a whole new lesson plan of personal hygiene for kids and faculty. So the long-term design impacts, I think, are being evolved as we speak, as we're really trying to get an understanding of it. But as we see for our neighbors in Europe and in Asia that have already opened their schools, they're operating at totally different types of facilities. They are exercising social distancing, they're staggering their school days, they have a fraction of the capacities of their schools. Sanitation, of course, is occurring at a daily interval. So there's a whole host of the operational issues, much more so than design. I think in design, what the Wellness Institute is recommending are a series of ventilation issues to enhance the breathability of a building and provide the quality of air environment to make it happen. But of course, corona is not airborne. It's more of a droplet type thing. So it's more of personal sanitation as opposed to relying on the mechanical systems. But nonetheless, they're an important component of creating a healthy interior environment. So that's kind of the way we see it. We're paying attention to all the research that's going on. One thing recently in some of the districts further north that we've seen is that they're making provisions for isolation rooms. So when in fact we do start bringing students into schools and we take temperatures, once someone is suspected of having or being sick, we have to deal with that. So the way that we've assigned some of the spaces might be a little bit different, but for the most part, it's going to be mostly, I think, be an operational issue as opposed to a design issue.
Lourdes, what do you think?
I think Jose is right. Operations is definitely probably the hardest part of this whole equation. But I think as architects, we can start to think of not only the little stuff, but it range from materials, make sure the material is easier to clean, the spaces, ability to use the materials to even point out direction for the kids to travel. There's things that we can, through design, help the operations on it. Obviously, an existing school is going to have a much more challenging time to accommodate, because it's not like they can just move buildings around. But the range can be from, as I said, from materials to putting UV lights in the ductwork, things that help the technology and the operations of the facility. Our school team in the office, we had a we have a weekly huddle of the school team, and we talked about, asked each of our staff, what would you do differently on your projects? And interestingly enough, many of the people in that team are originally from other countries, and we all recalled different shifts. You have the morning shift, you have the evening shift, the pedagogy is going to change, you have smaller classrooms. One of our recent graduates, Judith, started to think in terms of that urbanism. Maybe you start to create smaller classroom arrangements so that all those kids within that walking distance are actually all together. The idea that we're all sharing spaces with the same people, so that there's not, this constant coming and going. So then, when you start to use, retail that no longer works, and you become satellite schools, that's kind of like taking another step to look at, how do we help the operations? Obviously, Miami-Dade County Public Schools is such a large entity. It really is very, very challenging for them to come up with one solution. It's going to be a multiple solutions, I'm speculating. Whereas a private school or a small institution can certainly make their own arrangements to do those kind of things. But I think there's lots of things from an architecture point of view that we can do to help the operations. But it's certainly, and the pedagogy, I think it's going to change. We're going to go back to the smaller classrooms, which kind of benefited from our constitutional amendment some while ago, that we had a limit of the number of students. The square footage stayed the same, but really the number of students, and it's going to have to go back until we have some semblance of normalcy, whatever that is. We adapt. We're humans. We have to adapt.
Thanks. So, Jose, you took the words out of my next question, asking about health. Victor, what are you guys at the school board talking about in terms of incorporating some of these issues in terms of health and well-building requirements?
Well, some of the things that we've been doing, we've actually has worked to our advantage, and we're going to continue doing them in the future. I agree with what Lourdes and Jose said. Most of what we're having to do to adjust is operational in nature. For us to think that we're going to redesign spaces or make them bigger, it's just not feasible. There are many complicating factors that would affect that, the number of personnel, the fact that we wouldn't be able to implement changes unless there were future buildings in terms of size of rooms and that sort of thing. So realistically, we need to focus on things like maybe automatic door openers that are on sensors, more sanitation, sanitizers. We have bathroom doors that when we have interior corridors, we typically have been having doorless entries to bathrooms, much like in airports. And that's partly for security reasons. And we certainly are going to continue to do that. That helps, that you're not creating more surfaces that you're constantly having to touch. So that kind of thing. Maybe the hand dryers that you're not touching, fixtures like also that are with sensors that you don't have to touch. Possibly antimicrobial film. I saw something recently on a copper embedded material that's transparent that could be put over like elevator buttons. All kinds of things that are easily cleaned and are antimicrobial. We're going to look into that. One thing, and I'm an architect by training, not an engineer, but bipolar ionization air conditioning systems are supposed to be by polarizing the negative and positive particles in the air are supposed to be sanitizing as well. That's something that we've been requiring or just over the past less than 1 year. We've been instituting that in many of our projects. And that may be something that could be extremely helpful. That's along the lines of what Jose, I think, was alluding to before. So we're looking at anything that could enhance the sanitation of schools. It could reduce the transmission of something like this. This could happen again. This is human nature. These things have happened in the history of mankind for centuries. It's nothing new. It's just that it's abnormally, impacting us now. It reminds me of when we have hurricanes. There have been, over the years, there have been so many things that we have reacted to after Hurricane Andrew, sustainability issues and energy consumption, security, especially after parking, and there have been so many issues that we have to react to and we have to adjust our thinking to. Sometimes I think we overreact to some things, kind of a knee-jerk reaction to things, and in trying to solve one issue, we may create others. There's a lot of unintended consequences. So we have to be really mindful and have a long-term view of things. And I think that's one of the dangers with all of these things, because we're constantly having to redirect to what's the issue of the day and not thinking long-term.
Well, with the bond issue and a lot of new schools, what do you think that the school board will look at, maybe redirecting some of the funding to retrofit some of the older schools to some of these new areas like you're talking about, like the no-touch, doors and...
Well, most of our projects that are in the bond program are renovations. There are some new construction projects, but the bulk of it is renovations. And what we try to do is to update and embed in our design criteria certain requirements for equipment, for materials, in our specifications to try to address those things. So we will be taking a look at some of these things. And as we review projects that are in the design stage, we're going to try to incorporate some things that are applicable at this point. But I think we're sort of playing it by ear for now and trying to emphasize the things that we know that long-term we want to apply and see what works and take it from there.
So obviously none of us knows what's going to happen, and we don't know how long it'll take for a vaccine to come into play. And do you think that, or has the school district, sorry, I'm not meaning to leave you out, Lourdes and Jose, I just got school questions. Are you looking at perhaps sending surveys to parents to see if they want to, how they feel about school starting again, and about continuing homeschooling? Do you know if that's...
They've already done that. In fact, I know I filled it out.
I think there was a due date of, maybe it's today, the 20th.
Oh, okay.
I think so, yeah.
Because I know that Broward sent something out, a survey, and they got it back last week, and I had seen that the superintendent had been very active in trying to get information back from parents.
It's on the DCPS website, and parents got an email. I know because I got one and I filled it out.
But again, I think it's more operational issues like you mentioned, how they feel. I'm sure parents feel a lot of concern about their children going back to school now. I would imagine obviously it's going to be for the fall. There's no school in session now and over the summer, and the superintendent and the school board is taking every precaution possible, really. We've been focused in on the facility side. It's been primarily an operational issue, and the superintendent has spearheaded that. So we're taking a back seat to those issues.
So one of the questions that I had, you might have answered already, but we didn't specifically talk about schools and adaptive reuse. That do you think that there will be different or additional uses to some of the schools because maybe the numbers of kids in the classrooms might change? Lourdes?
Yeah, that is a conversation. From a private institution, perhaps it's easier to do that. I think both public and private could look at how do you have less kids in the classrooms, so do you reuse some of the current spaces you have that are not classified as classrooms? Do you create a satellite small classroom, school in a small area so that all the kids are within that sort of area? You might want to go back to the old fashioned, you go to the school of your neighborhood versus now the school of choice. You might have to encourage people to stick to their neighborhood so at least you know who the kids are. And you certainly have to start to think, of outside spaces as well. I mean, start to teach and move the kids outside more often. PE may become a much more popular subject than it has been in the past, simply because it's get the kids to eat outside. And that's part of your adaptive reuse. How do you use the space? How do you take an existing building that had another function, restaurants and retails may be closing. Again, it's a little more challenging perhaps for the public school system because they already have 400 and some gazillion buildings that they need to address. They certainly don't want to acquire a whole bunch of new ones. But, it is one way of implementing sort of satellite schools maybe. Private schools can do the same. It's a little bit harder for them because maybe they have their own little neighborhood and how do I find a space nearby? But if we're going to have all the kids back in school, some form of school at some point, that's the only way to accommodate the number of students that we have. Otherwise, everybody has to stay home again or go back to split or evening shift, morning shift, afternoon shift.
So, Jose, I want to go through and ask each one of you this question, and then we'll go to some Q&A. But Jose, what is the most important thing that you want to share about the situation that we're in schools and the importance of connecting the dots when you're looking at new designs for schools?
Well, it's not solely an architectural problem. I think what this pandemic has shown is it's been a humbling experience for us all, because despite all the advances and everything that we enjoy with our science and our technology, I mean, this has been a reality check as the vulnerability that we all share, and how quickly in a global society something could escalate out of control. But the reverse is also true, because what's been encouraging is the heroic acts that people have committed to put themselves in the line of danger and really do some wonderful things for the collective. And then the almost the eerie feel, because I walk to work every day, and when I was walking home when this first happened, seeing downtown Miami as a virtual ghost town was scary, but also inspiring, because there was there was an awareness that we are all in this together, and that everyone was taking a responsible act and doing whatever they could. And the city was really barren, and it's across the country, across the world. So the thing to remember is that from my perspective is the interdependence that we share in solving all the big problems that we have. And it is not solely the architect or the client or the engineer. It is when we come together and we collect our mental resources and our financial resources, do we solve the big problems. And I think that's what is the big lesson learned to take away from this. It's been very, very humbling from my perspective.
Lourdes, parting things to remember.
One of the things that similar to Jose is that we adapt. Humans, we make do with whatever situation we have. We may not like it. We may, kind of fight it at times, but we adapt. As we said at the beginning of the session, most of our architects, at least our office, we were able to quickly, make changes, and we could continue to produce. And we're very creative. The schools of architecture started to produce, through their 3D printing, find ways to solve. We're problem solvers, not only as architects, but as a human race. And I think that's a reminder for all of us that we working together can come up with solutions, and we adapt. I mean, we've been adapting for thousands and thousands of years. Who would want to live in freezing area or super hot? But we managed to do it. And we continue to find ways to make our lives easier, hence air conditioning and heating systems and indoor plumbing. And so I think it's just a reminder, as Jose says, that we will find solutions together, and we will come up with a new solution that works, well for us, and not think the negative side. I keep thinking of that Wall-E movie where all the people are on that spaceship and they're not functioning with their little iPad. So, you have to keep a positive spin, otherwise you get a little depressed. But like Jose said, seeing so many people out on the street walking and exercising, I thought was wonderful. My kids were like, who are all these people that live in our neighborhood, Mom? We've never seen them before. So I think it brought a realization that we're all different, but we're all, together, and we'll find a way to deal with it. We are now.
Thanks. Victor, what's the most important thing for us all to remember?
I would echo what Lourdes and Jose said. We're all in this together. We have more in common. We have much more in common than we have differences among us. And when there is a situation like this, that we learn from it, and despite the tough times and the unfortunate things that are happening to many, that we learn something positive.
I didn't get any too.
Somebody's got noisy neighbors.
Yeah.
Thanks. So one of the questions is due to maybe reduced economic revenue forecasted for next year, is the school board anticipating a reduction in the capital improvements forecast in the next 5 years?
Well, there's no question that we're going to be impacted across the board as an institution. Fortunately, though, much of the funding that we have in place right now is from the GO bond, the General Obligation Bond of 2012. We still have, we've expended about 2/3 of that. And now we're about 2/3 of the way through. We've got still projects to advertise, projects to commission that we have funding for. And we're starting to supplement it with other funding sources that are not as significant, but we have local millage, and we have impact fees, concurrency funding that contribute to it. So we're somewhat insulated. The school board is obviously, from an operational point of view, going to be greatly impacted. Any institution that is tied to the state of Florida. You know, when you think about all of the sales tax, most of the sales tax, ultimately, most of the budget, the state budget goes towards education. I think it's the single biggest expenditure. So the school board is going to greatly be affected. But like I said, much of what we have already is funding sources that are dedicated to facilities, to capital improvements. So we're fortunate to that extent.
So I have a question here that's not really a facilities question, but Victor, you might have heard some discussions about this. Someone is asking, is the school board considering focusing on revising and improving students' diet? A healthier diet is better for the immune system.
Wow.
Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't heard that, but we have a department which is food and nutrition, and we have someone there, Penny Parham is in charge of that, who is really very cutting edge, and she's always looking for improvements into diet and for school operations in terms of the cafeteria workers and that sort of thing. And that's one area where I would imagine is going to be impacted in how they operate cafeterias. You can imagine people shoulder to shoulder, kids coming in, is going to be something that's going to take a while. I think what's going to be happening is that there may be options to eat in the classrooms. We fortunately have been creating spill out dining, exterior dining areas in most of our projects, which is really helpful to us right now. And we've been doing it for financial reasons. But when you think about it, and I go to a lot of schools where we have projects and see, especially in the high school age, kids enjoy eating outdoors much more than eating inside a cafeteria. And they'll find any place that has some shade. And fortunately, in the summer, we don't have, you know, the schools occupied as much, but kids prefer that. And we've been very successful in having outdoor dining spaces. And so far as the food itself, the diet, I cannot specifically talk about that, but I know we have people that are very, very actively involved in it.
So I see another question here, that there's a concern that a lot of the hands-free operations for fixtures, doors, elevators will increase costs significantly, especially in long-term maintenance. And Jose, have you been doing research on bacteria-resistant materials and
well, yes, as far as the pandemic is concerned, but the bigger part of that question is the contradiction that we kind of have in the state as far as funding is concerned. The state has been passing legislation, House Bill 7070, that puts a student station cap on the expenditures for what you could spend per student for construction. So what this pandemic is going to do is help reprioritize what some of those things are. There are, no matter a school in upstate Florida or down here, you get the same student station funding. So one of the challenges that we're going to have is in areas that have a high infection rate, such as South Florida, we may need to be acting in a way that is specific to our community's needs and don't necessarily respond to those state mandates as far as the caps are concerned. So those are political questions that are going to come about. Of course, the legislation never anticipated that we would be facing a pandemic, but our ability of being able to deal with the safety and wellness issues has to kind of be calibrated with the legislations that are in place and the rules that are in place.
Lourdes, do you have any, you're on mute, yeah.
Yeah, well, our office, we've been looking at materials that could be used that are, you know, more antibacterial or easier to clean. Some of those electronic devices, motion sensors, and those things that you know, you want for doors or sinks. The school board was already implementing some of that. So it's a good point about the maintenance, the long-term maintenance. But that's something that was already being put in. So we're really kind of looking at the two extremes, how the material that might be something a little more affordable, and maybe something that is a longer term, more of a cost. But it's certainly something to look at, and you know, something might be just a simple solution of adding more sinks around the school, or more, you know, locations for the kids to wash their hands with hand sanitizer. We don't sometimes have to think too complicated. Maybe it's a simpler solution that's easier to institute on an existing building. Newer buildings obviously have challenges, but as Jose says, you know, our costs down here have always been more than building a school in the middle of Central Florida, which builds a school once every 10 years if they're lucky. So it's a bit of a political challenge to get us more funding to address things that are unique to South Florida versus Tallahassee, Pensacola, you know, the Forgotten Coast up there.
Well, you know, AIA is all about advocacy. So when you have issues that you know that you're on the forefront that you hear about, reach out to us so that we can get our troops and, you know, help with advocating. You know, got to give a plug.
Yeah.
Absolutely, we have to advocate, and we do that every time we go up there. So
absolutely. There was a question about portables, and you know, that are or modular classrooms that exist in the schools. How do you think that those might be affected? Victor, you want to take that?
Yeah, you know, we've actually, a few years ago, I think we had about 2,000 individual units, portables in schools. And I would say more than half have been removed or demolished. And many of the ones that are remaining are not even occupied right now. We've got a fraction of the ones that we used to have. Part of it is because the enrollment has gone down with the advent of charter schools, and with the additional student stations that have been built over the past 10, 15 years, we've actually have schools that are under-enrolled. We have a very few that are significantly enrolled, overcrowded. So we have much less of an issue with portables than we used to 10, 15 years ago. In terms of how those are impacted by this, I would think not too differently than any classroom itself. So it hasn't been an issue that we have particularly been conscious of. It's more an issue that sometimes security for them, being somewhat separated from the main campus, is more of an issue. The fact that some are not connected by covered walkways, and days like we've had in the recent past, it'd be very difficult to be going back and forth. Those are more the practical issues that we would have. Many of them have bathrooms, so they wouldn't have to be going back and forth. So it's really not been a significant issue that we have been dealing with, primarily because we have done away with the vast majority of portables in public schools.
So thanks, Victor. So one of the questions is that maybe because of all of this, some of the office buildings will have more space because fewer people will be, people working remotely more. I know that that's a discussion that we've had in another program. And so they were asking, has the school board considered in the future maybe decentralizing some of the larger schools and using some space in existing office buildings or other spaces that are underutilized?
Well, we would be open to repurposing schools or any of our other ancillary facilities. We have always had a very difficult time of repurposing schools because the communities are very, very much attached to the schools. It's difficult to do that. There have been attempts over the years to close down schools, and it's met with a lot of resistance, and that's a reality. But in terms of, we have actually reduced our administrative space over the past 10, 15 years significantly, and we probably will in the future. And the fact, what we have seen now is probably going to speed that up, because we have over 300,000 square feet of space in our downtown office complex area. And we certainly would not need that much if we were starting from scratch. Although we're packed, people are packed. But I think the way we're going to operate in the future is something that architects have to really think about a great deal, because I think offices are probably where it's going to be impacted the most, not so much the school, the educational aspect of it, because you still, the socialization aspect of education is essential, and you can't replace that. As much as you could have virtual learning and to supplement education, you need to have that face-to-face contact. You can't replace that. And to some degree, you need that even in an office setting, in an architectural office. You still need that collaboration, that, getting people together, hashing things out, sketching things out. There's a great deal to be gained from it. But I think we probably could save a lot of square footage. We probably could be a lot more productive in our office spaces. And we certainly are going to be considering that in the future internally. But I think that's a real challenge for architects going forward with other clients, commercial clients in particular.
So thank you, Victor. And we have like 3 minutes. And Jose and Lourdes, do you have any parting words?
Oh, Lourdes?
I was going to give it to you.
Okay. Well, yeah, I just go back to the same point that I was raising earlier, which is the fact that we need to get our schools open again. I mean, that's essential. And it's what this pandemic has shown is how essential they are bringing the economy back, because it's not simply just the education they provide, but it's the partnership in child rearing, and defining normalcy as being able to know that your children are being taken care of and they're being educated. So I think it's an essential part of bringing the economy back, is opening our schools and doing it in a safe way, where staff and students and families feel like their children are being well taken care of.
I agree.
Thanks, Jose. Lourdes?
I can see my kids who are teenagers, they're enjoying not to, have to get up so early and staying at home, but they themselves and some of my Girl Scouts have said they know they don't learn as much. They're actually looking and they're looking forward to at least going back part of the time so that they can hang out with their friends. That socialization aspect, as Victor mentioned, we really, really all needed. Adults, we've adapted very well to working from home. Many of us find it very productive because we kind of sometimes can work very isolated and on task focus, and we're not really learning something, we're accomplishing a task. Children still need a little bit more of that interaction, that ability to contact with each other, with the teachers, and that's to me very, very important. And Jose is right. The sooner we can get them open, the better. One of the things that concerns me is, at least from an architectural business, is the young recent graduates that are graduating from the schools of architecture. You learn so much from being in an office and eavesdropping of all the people that are the projects that are going around you. You get involved in a project that is maybe not yours, or you're only doing the stair detail, but all of a sudden you start to see all this thing. And that's how you learn to be a better architect. That's how you learn to be a better designer. And those young people are, I think, if we migrate so much completely to this format, it's going to be lost. That incoming generation of architects is really going to have to work harder to pick up the things that Victor and Jose and many of the people on this call, we picked up when we first graduated. And I think we as an organization and as professionals need to make an extra effort to help them, however that needs to be, because otherwise we're going to lose a whole segment of a young graduation of emerging professionals who will not have the experience we've had. It'll be different if profession changes. We all drew by hand when we started, now we do computer, but we really need to engage them.
Well, thanks, Lourdes. And as a matter of fact, we do have some programming around that coming up, so stay tuned. Jose, Lourdes, Victor, and Daphne, thank you very much for participating and joining us today. Thanks, Colleen, for being the director of the program. Thanks to everyone for dialing in, calling in. Next week, our town hall is on facilities, offices going back to work, and we have facilities people that are going to talk about how they're preparing their buildings and letting people back in. So thank you all. It's 1 o'clock, and we're done.
All right, punctual.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you.
Thanks.
Colleen?